Hello, and thank you for joining me for our webinar on automating AWS cloud infrastructure today. My name is Jerry Dollins, and I am a Senior Solutions Architect on the Proofs of Concept team here at Itential, where I have the pleasure of working with our customers every day to solve problems through automation. Before we start, let's talk about why it's important for network teams to know about AWS cloud automation. I want you to think about the applications that your organization uses every day. Do they reside in the cloud? Are they only in the cloud, or do they have data that lives in your data center? Perhaps you have policies that require you to store data on premises. Because of this, cloud networking is becoming more complex, especially when you're working with more than one cloud provider. You can't automate hybrid and multi-cloud networks without being able to automate the cloud. Additionally, by automating your cloud networking, it becomes part of the DevOps process instead of just being the afterthought. I hear from many network engineers that they're hesitant about learning cloud networking, but we see this as the next network domain that you're going to become experts in. So let's go ahead and let's talk about our demo today. Today, we're going to be utilizing some Itential pre-builts from our library to rapidly integrate with the AWS cloud platform. We'll be building out and testing data transformations to format data to be used for API calls. We'll have a workflow to provision our new AWS VPC. And then we'll be creating a new instance, EC2 instance, as part of that same workflow. And then finally, we'll be showing you how we can then publish that workflow and run the automation. And we'll be using a form for our data input here. On the right-hand side, you can see our diagram showing you how we interact with the various systems today. You can see at the top, various users, your network team, your DevOps team, they're able to come into the automation platform and work through Operations Manager. Operations Manager then triggers our workflow, and our workflow is able to talk to AWS, which then works with our VPC in our EC2 instance. Next, we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at our workflow for provisioning our VPC in our EC2 instance. So here we have our workflow, and we'll go ahead from left to right here, and we'll just kind of talk through each step. The first step in our workflow here is a transformation. Transformation being Itential's low-code solution to data manipulation. And here we're using it to process that data that will be submitted via the form. Our next step is a child job. Child job allows us to leverage another workflow as our next step in this one here. In this case, we'll be running a workflow that creates the VPC that we'll be placing our new EC2 instance in. After that, we have another transformation. This time it's preparing additional data that's needed to create that EC2 instance. After that, we have our second child job, and this is the one that actually performs that operation, creating our EC2 instance. The last two steps in our workflow are a transformation and then a view data task. And what they do is they build and present a message to our user. So let's go ahead and let's take a deeper dive into a few steps in our workflow. So as I had said, our first one here is our transformation. And what it does is it's processing the data that's entered in a form and prepares it for use in our subsequent Itential pre-built workflows. And so let's go ahead and we'll take a look at how that all comes together. So what we have here is an example of a transformation here. In this case, it takes in our form data on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, it outputs the VPC subnet. Now, our form that we'll be using today, it takes in the VPC subnet IP and the subnet CIDR mask as two separate values. However, AWS expects that we provide them a single value in the CIDR notation. So we're going to do a little data manipulation here to get our data in the right format. The first thing I'll do is we're going to add a concat method. Go ahead and drag and drop this right here. The concat method allows us to combine two or more values into a single value. So what we're going to do is we'll go ahead and grab our subnet IP from our form data, and we'll connect it up to the first input on the concat task here. Now with CIDR notation, it'll be the IP address, a /, and then the CIDR mask. So the next box, we're going to go ahead and just type in the /. And then finally, we'll go ahead and grab our CIDR mask, and we'll connect it up to the third input on our task here. After we've done that, we simply take the return value here, and we'll connect it up to our outgoing VPC subnet. And then finally, we'll save the changes. So now we've put together our transformation to do our data manipulation. So what I can also do is I can click this preview button at the top, and we'll be able to see that the transformed data is in the format we now expect. So if I click here, we can see in our example, we are now providing the VPC subnet and the full CIDR notation as AWS expects. So for the use case today, I'll go ahead and show you what that transformation looks like. By following similar steps for the rest of our form data, you'll be able to build out a more complex transformation like the one you see here. And as you can see, we're obviously handling more data. Some of it's being passed through as is, some of it's being transformed before passing it along to the rest of our workflow. Let's go ahead and back into our workflow, and let's continue talking about the following steps. So after that first transformation here, we have that child job that creates our new VPC, but it also creates all of the associated networking that we require for our connectivity. Following that step, we have another transformation, and this one is taking the results of the VPC creation, the previous step, and it is using that to build the data we need to then create our EC2 instance. After that is our second child job for creating the instance. In this case, it'll be an Apache web server, and it uses that VPC that we just created in our previous steps. Let's go ahead and take a look at what this child job looks like. In this workflow here, our first step is the one that actually launches our instance of an EC2. Now in this case, we're letting AWS assign the IP addresses to our instance. But this could easily also be done by integrating with your IPAM system. And then we can add a task here to request, say, the next available IP address. After we've launched our instance, the next two steps are building the data that we use to apply tags to the instance, and then, of course, applying those tags. After that, we have this step here, which is describing the status of the instance. So it's going out to AWS, and it's checking to see if our instance is ready for us to use. So we will describe that instance. We'll then go into another transformation here. And this one, it is processing that result, and it's giving us a true or a false value as a return. So it's going to tell us whether or not the instance is fully up and ready for us. Following that transformation, we have our evaluation, which is checking to see if our EC2 launch is complete. And what that means is, are we ready to go? Did we get true here out of our describing of the instance and then the processing of that result? If so, it'll move forward. If not, we'll actually take the step down here, a delay step. And what it's going to do is it's going to pause for a moment here before going ahead and trying and grabbing that status again and seeing if it's ready to go. This way, our automation will wait for that instance to be completely up and ready before moving on. Once we get to the point that the instance is up and ready, we will then do a describe instance. And what that's doing is it's getting the details of our instance now that it's up and running. And then the last step after that is our query. And the query allows us to get specific piece of data out of the result of the describe instance. So we're getting those details, and then we're digging into it. And what we want here is we want to get that public IP address because we want to be able to present that to the user at the end. All right. Once we run that and our EC2 instance is up and running, we will then have our transformation to generate our completion message. So we're using a little bit different this time, where we're not pulling in, the form data from the user and passing through specific values. We're taking in the results of our EC2 creation, and we're using the data within there to build a message that we then share with the user. And then finally, we have our manual task, our view data task, which is going to pause our automation and wait for us to interact with it. And that's how we'll be able to then view that message. All right, now that we've reviewed, let's go ahead and run our automation. So I'll go ahead and step into Operations Manager. And here we'll see that we have our provision, VPC, and EC2 instance automation ready for us to run. We'll go ahead and use our form trigger here. And we'll get a form on the right-hand side, which allows us to fill out the required details. For today, we'll be using that Apache web server for our image. We'll go ahead and use small for the size of our instance here. For our region, we'll be using US East 1. For the VPC name, let's go ahead and just call it Webinar VPC. And for our subnet IP, we'll just use the 10.0.0.0. We'll use 28 for our CIDR mask today. And then finally, we'll add a simple security group ingress rule to allow us to be able to reach our web server once it's up and ready. We'll go ahead and add this here. As I said, simple web server, so we'll be doing TCP over port 80. Once we've completed our form, we can click Run Manually, and that will kick things off for us. Right. So as you can see here, we're watching our job as it runs. So we've already gone through our first transformation, the first child job, and their second transformation. That's all indicated by the green check mark on each of those. And then we can see that our child job is running here for the creation of that EC2 instance. Now, as you remember, that child job has a wait period while we wait for that instance to come up. Let's go ahead and see what that looks like right now. By clicking Open Child Job, we are able to drill down into that and see how we are processing there. And as we can see here, we've already launched our instance, we've added our tags, and we've gotten that first describe completed here on the instance status. At that point, we evaluated the result, and we've learned that the instance is not up and running for us yet. And so we're in this delay period here. And then once that completes, we'll come back around to the describe instance status. And again, we'll check and make sure that we're ready to go. So it'll be just a moment here before we're able to see our instance come up for us. Okay. Looks like our new EC2 instance is up and running. Let's go ahead and jump back into our main workflow. All right, and as we can see, our last step in our workflow, our view data task, is waiting for us here. So let's go ahead and work that task now. All right, and here we can see the message that we generated using that transformation, now made available for us to view. We've got a link here that'll allow us to see our new web server, so I'll go ahead and click that. And as you can see, we've successfully automated the deployment of an Apache web server here. Now, I do have one more thing that I wanted to share with you. If we go back into Operations Manager, there's another link in that message. So if we click that link, that will take us into our Configuration Manager and will show us our VPC. So we can see we have our VPC here. We have our address that we applied to it, as well as showing our status that it's online. And also, we can then click Load Configuration. And this will go out and grab all the information about our VPC and make it available to view here in Configuration Manager. Okay, folks, well, that brings us to the end of our demonstration. So let's go ahead and let's summarize what we've covered here today. We reviewed and ran an automation that processed the data submitted in a form to prepare it for our automation. It then created our new VPC and the associated networking. And then we created our new EC2 instance within that VPC. And then finally, we provided the link to the new web server, as well as to the new VPC in Configuration Manager. I'd like to thank you for your time today. And just one last thing before we end the webinar. Here at Itential, we offer free hands-on technical workshops. And what we saw today here is one of the many use cases we offer where you can spend time with someone from our team and try it out for yourself. You can check it out at itential.com/automation-workshop. Take a look at all of our use cases and let us know which one you want to try.